Hello boys and girls, and welcome to another goosebump-inducing episode of AndyManCam's Garage. Today we're going to be fitting this booster plug to this Kawasaki Versys 650. The exceptionally pleasant and obviously bike-crazy people up at Boosterplug in Denmark have kindly sent me a booster plug to fit my Kawasaki Versys so that I can see for myself and hopefully show everybody else how much of a difference this little beastie can make to the fueling of your fuel-injected motorbike. So let's have a look at what else I got in my little packet here. First of all, there's the plug itself. It's got a bunch of electrical wizardry in here. There's a plug and a socket at either end of the wire. There's no splicing, no cutting needed. And then there's a temperature sensor which you stuff somewhere else to do some temperature sensey stuff. Also in here I've got a booster plug keyring, a booster plug business card with a motorcycle conversion chart on it. Now that's going to come in handy for the tour, isn't it, with the geeks among us. There's also a sticker, Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, pissing on a power commander. Brilliant. They've definitely got a sense of humour up at Boosterplug. There's the installation instructions with another booster plug sticker, how it works. Finally, model specific instructions. So they clearly have thought everything through. They haven't just given it to you and expected you to figure it out yourself. So yeah, I need to get to my airbox to plug this thing into the air intake temperature sensor. So let's get to the airbox, shall we? Screen off first, currently mounted in its very unorthodox super low position, which incidentally just didn't work. Still buffeted the crap out of me. For those of you who are at all interested, the search for the perfect screen position goes on with this bike, sadly. I even tried taking the screen completely off and I was still getting buffeted in the face. So it seems quite literally the only choice available is just going to be to strip all the fairings off and have a naked bike. And as the keen-eyed among you will have noticed, I've actually upgraded my setup. Check it out, I've got a worktop and everything. Ignore the fact that it's supposed to be in a kitchen. Waste not, want not, eh? So, this is a little bit of a faff, because to get to the airbox I need to take the tank off. To get the tank off, I need to get all the fairings off. Of course, I have had these fairings off more than I care to really count, so getting relatively quick at it now. Incidentally, I have actually been looking at a few pictures on Pinterest just lately of Kawasaki Versyseses that have been stripped back to the Street Fighter kind of look. And I have to say, they do look pretty awesome actually. Some of them are really, really well done. Oh dear, this vinyl is looking very tired already, isn't it? That's going to be a redo job for the winter, I think. Might have to try the Plasti Dip route next time. Lots of people were mentioning that when they saw the carbon covering videos. So now we need to get under the seat to get both this panel off and that out of the way. Philip! Oh Philip! Has anyone seen Philip? Philip! Philip! There you are, Philip. I've had this bike to pieces so many times. Very soon I'm going to have to buy an entire new set of nuts and bolts. Like, look, this one is already a little bit tired. And isn't it ironic that when a Phillips screw gets tired, you can normally open it with just the right size flathead. Pull the plastic penises from the rubber vaginas. Put that over there. Now, 10. Why, when you want a 10, can you only find 11s? Look, there's one there. There's one there. There it is. Stick that up there. Right, just in the interest of not breaking it, I'm going to remove this bolt. I've already snapped the one on the other side, so that one doesn't matter. I'm going to see if I can just lever the tank up rather than take it all the way off. It'd be nice not to have to disconnect the fuel line and all that kind of stuff. Thankfully, it is almost completely empty right now. I think we might be able to get away with this, you know, ladies and gents. Just need something to hold the whole thing up securely. Right, well, I've hunted the garage, and obviously a piece of wood or something like that would be my first choice, but needs must, so I'll use this empty brake fluid bottle, which I've just emptied, bleeding the front brakes out. That looks pretty solid. No kinks or cables under pressure or strain. There's our socket that we need to get into. That's the connector for the air intake temperature sensor. So first of all, you need to disconnect that, pull it out, just push the tab on the top, pull hopefully. There it is. See in there? That's the sensor itself. That's our new mounting point for our booster plug. Let's get the booster plug out, see what we're looking at. A handy Ziploc bag. Things like this are always actually quite handy for keeping your spare camera batteries and things in when you know they're not going to get wet in your bag. Right, we have got a male plug, a female plug, and a sensor on a cable. So if we pull our female from the loom out here, plug this into that, like so. We plug this into there, like that. Now, for all intents and purposes, that's now fitted. But we need to stick this somewhere. This is an external temperature sensor which takes the ambient temperature of the air, feeds that into this and helps it to figure out what it's doing with the fuel mix. Right, now suddenly I am thinking this is going to be a bit faffy because apparently the best place to mount this is between the snorkels at the front of the airbox. Now that's all the way in there and it needs to be secured where it is. I can't just poke it in and leave it there. So what I'm going to do is take the tank off and we'll be able to see what's going on properly. First and most important, now this red clip has 2 prongs on it. I need to spread them apart with my fingers here. Hopefully you can see this. And then push that red thing across and then that fuel connector should just pop off. Come around the other side and get a better look. So now we should be able to just pull that off. There we go. Now there was a tiny little bit of fuel come out there, but don't panic, that's just what's in the plug. Because as soon as the power is disconnected, the fuel pump seals itself off. So nothing's going to come out of there. There is still some in the line, so watch out for that. So unplug the power for the fuel pump itself, which has a fly in it. Nice. Why would you want to live in there? So the fuel pump disconnected. I think this one here is the fuel gauge sender. And finally the breather pipe, which I think we'll leave in place and just pull it out to give us some slack. So now, my plan is to just pick this up, spin it round, lay it on the back there. To that end, I'm going to put this cushion in place. Slide the tank backwards, comes off of these big lugs at the front there. Then we can spin it round and the only thing still connected is the breather pipe. And then rest it like that. Making sure nothing's going to break the outlet of the fuel pump. Yep, that's all safe. We can leave that there like that for now. Continue dicking about. So as you can see a little bit better now, here's the air intake temperature sensor. This is the cable that used to be connected to there. It's now got the booster plug in the middle of it. Now the one small problem I do see is that in the instructions it says to put it between the snorkels, but not over the cylinder head or by the radiator. The cylinder head is there, and the radiator's right there, and the snorkels are in there. So they're all kind of close together. I'm thinking it might just be better to stick it up here somewhere. The most important thing is it needs to get a stream of cool air so that it gets the actual temperature of the air around it and it's not affected by the heat of the engine. Because this temperature sensor sends a signal to the ECU telling it how warm the air is in the airbox and it adjusts the fueling accordingly to match with the air temperature. This little beauty fools it into thinking that it's 20 degrees cooler than it really is. And what this makes it do is it adds a 6% increase in the fuel, which gets rid of that horrible, lumpy, hesitant fueling that you get at the bottom end of injection bikes. And the temperature sensor is there to add an extra parameter, because just sticking a resistor into the system to fool the sensor into thinking it's 20 degrees cooler doesn't give you the best results all the time. So this temperature sensor evens out that fueling change to make it a bit more constant, a bit more reliable. So it needs to be out in the air. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to poke it through here like this. Actually stick it just to this cable there so that it's in the wind, it's protected from the wet, it's protected from the heat of the engine. Hopefully that'll do the job nicely. I'm going to need some cable ties for this job. Hidden in my kitchen drawer I have just the right tools. Put that there. Hopefully this will do the job nicely. There we go, that's my external sensor there. Now obviously most people, me included, when I heard that it just adds 6% to the fueling, I thought, well, when I'm on the motorway, I don't necessarily want to have 6% more fuel being chucked through the engine because I'm going to be using 6% more fuel, which means 6% less range, ultimately 6% more faff. But it's my understanding that this little doohickey doesn't actually affect cruising fuel economy or high-speed fuel economy, because what happens is it adjusts the fueling every time you touch the throttle, and it adjusts it instantly because the ECU thinks it's a lot colder than it really is. But then once you maintain a constant throttle speed and you're high-speed cruising, the O2 or the Lambda sensor, which is in your exhaust pipe, tells the ECU that the fueling was wrong, and then it adjusts it accordingly. So it adds the extra fuel when you're dicking around coming on and off the throttle, which is exactly when you want it. And as soon as you maintain the throttle, everything gets reset back to normal and the ECU corrects itself. That's really simple but really impressive stuff, and I'm looking forward to trying it out. Now we need to stick this somewhere so it's out of the way and so that it doesn't get crushed by the petrol tank. Now thankfully there's quite a lot of cable here so we can shove it out of the way. It's also quite nice to see that rather than just being soldered in, these cables are all glued into the sockets as well. It looks like a pretty good quality piece of manufacturing here, and cable shrunk at the ends, glued in there as well. Doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart in the first 10 minutes. Now, of course, if you wanted to mount this plug well out of the way of what's going on over here, it does say in the instructions again that you can just cut this wire, add some wire of the same gauge, solder the ends up nicely, heat shrink it, and then put the plug wherever you want. I'd rather not do that nonsense. So now I'm going to poke the control boxy doohickey brain of this operation into this little space here. There we go, like it was made for it. All these wires look happy. Plug fits into this little recess here. And then we've just got a little bit of excess wire to tidy up. One cable tie around there. So that's that all neat and tidy. And one round there. Just trim those ends off. And there we go, all neat and tidy. Booster plug is now tucked up under there. It's connected into the ECU here. Cable runs around here and then up into the air intake temperature sensor. Now we just need to stick it back together, get out and see how it performs. So this is pretty much a reverse of what we just did. Rotate the tank round, locate the front lug jobs on those big rubber bungs, chock back in place. Fuel pump power, fuel pipe, push the red thing on, fuel gauge sender, poke the breather pipe back down out of the way, gently lay the tank down, tighten them up, get that tightened back up. Side covers back on. Poke that in there, poke that in there, poke that in there. Screw that back in there. Philip! Oh, Philip! There you are. Screw this one in there. Poke this, shove that, screw the other. There we go. I should probably clean some of these insects off before we leave, but that's the booster plug all fitted, ready to go out on the street and see how it performs in real life. I'll see you out there. Well, I've only been bombing around on the bike for about half an hour now, but I've got to say I've noticed a marked difference in the way that this bike is performing already. For a start, the engine braking is a lot softer. It doesn't just feel like you've chucked an anchor with a parachute on it out the back when you chop the throttle. See that? You can just gently roll off. Before, it was chop the throttle, bosh, it's like you've jammed the brakes on at the same time. Look at that old beast. And by the smell of it, he's got about 20 booster plugs plugged into his ECU. Which in those is actually just a Casio wristwatch. On and off the throttle is so much softer. I mean, look, I can just gently roll off. And it's not like, which it was before, and then gently roll on again. That's awesome. That's one of the biggest problems of this bike, ironed out. Just like that, bosh. All it did was plug a little thingy in, and amazing. And in the past as well, clutchless shifts on this bike have been very hit and miss, quite clunky. I was starting to think that a lot of that was down to rider error, but now I'm finding clutchless shifts far smoother, far slicker, far easier. I guess it's just because the revs aren't instantly dying off when you chop the throttle to switch the gear, and you have to make that change so quick to catch it. Whereas now, like an old bar of soap, everything's a bit smoother and a bit softer. Downshifts as well, rev matching. So much easier. And I know a lot of you are going to be screaming snake oil and placebo, but against that I just say I absolutely hated the on-off digital throttle action of this bike. I mean, I can't even recreate it anymore. That's still smoother than it used to be when I wasn't trying to do it. Obviously the real test is going to be out there in the twisties, out there on the hairpins, which is going to be coming next week. Very excited about that, but I'm impressed already. There we go, smoothly cruising along, 2,500 revs just under in top gear. And I can pull away from it. I mean, it's not smooth, but there's no misfire, there's no fart, there's no stumble. When I went from overrun back to accelerating there, but before that would have been like the service at a karate-themed brothel, a chop and a jerk. Whereas it just rolled smoothly from off to throttle on. Yeah, I'm happy. To hear corners like this before, I would not have been able to thread on the throttle as smoothly as that. Quite often before in first gear and second gear slow speed corners, I'd have to feather the clutch on my way round to pull off smoothly. So yeah, very impressed. That's the booster plug. First impressions, very happy with what it's doing for me. Obviously the long-term test is going to be riding to Italy and back. So I'll see you out there. Till then, take care and goodbye.